There's a very specific shift that happens after trauma that's easy to misread. You can be in the middle of an ordinary room, having a normal conversation, or just going about your daily routine, and the weight of a moment can change quite quickly. It could be, a shift in tone, or an unnaturally long pause, or something about the room, and your body starts treating it like a completely different environment. Attention tends to narrow before your conscious mind is finished checking the tone. And then you can spend the next several minutes trying to find out why you're having such a large reaction to something that looks like nothing. And that's the part I want to look at. We usually describe this through the lens of fear, and fear is a component of it, but fear can make it sound like the main problem is an alarm about danger, when what's often actually happening beneath that is a sorting problem. The nervous system is having trouble distinguishing between a signal that belongs to right now and a signal that belongs to a different context entirely. And making that distinction does sound simple on paper, but in reality, it's one of the more complex things the brain has to manage. Because after significant threat, the system stops doing it so cleanly. So the question isn't only why am I afraid? The question is, what is the mind classifying as present evidence that actually belongs to an older story? And you can see this sorting attempt in the way the mind loops and replays what happened, because from the outside, it might look like rumination or someone who's having trouble letting a memory go. But at the level of what the system is actually doing, replaying is often an unresolved task. The system keeps returning to the material because it hasn't reached a verdict. It's still trying to answer a basic question of, is this actually over? And if the answer isn't clear enough at the level where the question lives, the loop keeps running. So you can tell someone they're safe and they can believe you intellectually, but the part of the system that's still checking isn't checking in language. It's thinking in terms of prediction models, internal physical state, things like raw sensory data. So it doesn't need an explanation it can understand. It needs evidence it can actually feel. And the memory piece is the part I find most interesting, because we treat memory like a file that's retrieved, but it's actually reconstructed from scratch every time it returns. Normally, when the brain assembles a memory, it attaches something like a timestamp or a marker that says, this happened before, this is a record, and it belongs to back then. But under intense threat, that process does become unstable. The brain encodes the raw data, the intensity, the survival response, but it does lose context of the when. So it's not, it's like the brain's not sure whether the conditions that made it dangerous still apply. So when a current cue activates that material, the signal can arrive without a marker. It's not, saying this is a memory from before. It's easy to misinterpret as something that's closer to happening right now. So your conscious mind knows the year, knows the room, knows who or what is in front of you, but that deeper underlying system is reading a signal with no date on it. The system can be wrong about the moment without the response being fake. And this spreads into how you occupy a room with other people. Because the hardest part usually isn't the physical reaction itself, it's that the cue that triggered it looks far too small to justify the response. And you can understand it, you can try to explain it, but if you try to describe the small thing that set it off, you can, it doesn't always sound like proportionate to the person listening. So the isolation, isn't always only from the experience itself. It's from the impossibility of making that math add up whenever you vocalize it. Because sometimes nothing's visibly happening at all. The room can be quiet, things can seem normal, but that internal system isn't. So there is this common assumption that recovery means the memory fades or the triggers disappear. But recovery isn't usually the brain deleting the old fear learning. The research describes something closer to a competition happening, where changing the system doesn't mean erasing the old learning. means building that new learning that accumulates with enough weight to compete with it. So the old prediction's going to stay. It just stops winning by default as newer, safer experiences accumulate that the body can actually register. And it is a slow, progressive process. It's not always linear because the system requires enough physical evidence to actually update those settings. Old prediction doesn't have to disappear for the system to become more flexible. It has to stop winning by default. So that's the frame we're going to look at this month. It's this mechanism map of what the system is actually doing when the past keeps arriving as present evidence. And understanding the mechanism doesn't update the system by itself, but it does change what the experience gets mistaken for. And for a lot of people, that's where something first begins to shift. It's not the signal, but the misread.